Welcome to Expanding Access, a podcast by Behavioral Health Tech, where we explore the cutting edge of mental health, substance use, and autism and IDD care. Each episode features insightful conversations with industry leaders who are driving real change through technology and innovation. Whether you're a provider, payer, or just passionate about expanding access to behavioral health care, you won't want to miss these stories. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. I'm Solome Tibabu, your host of the Expanding Access podcast, and I am thrilled to have Claudia and Adrienne with us today. We have such a juicy conversation. Thank you both for taking the time. Why don't we start off by just doing a little brief introduction? So how about Claudia and Adrienne, if you could go ahead and just briefly who you are and your roles and go from there.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having us. We're excited. Adrienne Prentice, co-founder and CEO of Keep Company. We are based in Bethesda, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. So I often joke that I took a very D.C. path. I practiced law for over a decade, and then I became an executive coach and focused a lot on talent management and supporting people in professional services. And I'll stop there because the rest of my story gets into Keep Company, and I know we're going to spend a lot of time talking about it.
I am Claudia Naim-Burt, co-founder and COO of Keep Company, and I started my career in corporate communications and then shifted to brand marketing. In that process, fell in love with startups and spent the last 15 years in startups, including FrameBridge, a direct-to-consumer business, and several others. And in a parallel but separate way, Adrienne and I, for both of us, becoming parents was really like a catalyst for the journey that led us here. For both of us, we became obsessed with this question of just what would help with that very complicated emotional and physical transition and the way it shows up in how we work and how we live. And the thread that emerged was really everybody we talked to said some version of, it feels like I'm the only one. The only one who's having a hard time, the only one who hasn't figured this out, the only one who also has a parent with dementia, the only one who also has a chronic illness, fill in the blank. And so our kind of core really started with how we bring people together in a meaningful way that are navigating a similar experience or situation. So Keep Company evolved to support from moms to groups of moms and dads, groups of caregivers, groups of people just entering the workforce. So today, Keep Company offers groups based on any shared experience for any segment of an employee or patient population. So today, Keep Company is a platform that serves as really the infrastructure for group connection at scale. How do you make this really powerful intervention offering, which is groups available to as many people as possible? And I'll stop there.
There's just so much need for support, and it's wonderful to hear the story of how things came to be. But Claudia, maybe I'll ask you, of course, in the behavioral health tech community, we've seen so many solutions, and a lot of platforms promise well-being outcomes through self-guided content or community features that really are ultimately just message boards. You took a different approach. Why did you bet on groups as really the lever for behavior change?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for what we found is we looked at coaching as an intervention. We looked at all of the different component parts. And at the beginning, it really was coaching plus community plus content. We were really focused on outcomes, though. That was our number one priority. We wanted to be able to show retention in the workforce. We wanted to be able to show that this intervention enabled sustainability at work and in life. And really what we found was that there was no greater exacerbator of burnout than loneliness. There was nothing more paralyzing from a behavior change perspective than the shame of feeling like you're the only one. It really creates a paralysis around like making change. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to make positive change in people's behaviors when the systemic pieces for them are not in place. And so we really found that to be the ultimate thread. I think there are so many, when you do groups right, when you do community right, it really can create an enormous amount of stickiness. And what ends up happening is that people come back because the group acts as this kind of implicit source of accountability. So maybe you don't go back if it's just you and a coach or you and a therapist or you and a care navigator, because I'm the last thing on my list. That's what we hear from people all the time. But if other people are waiting for you, other people are counting on you, you're much more likely to come back and get the benefit in the process. I think that where I see other people maybe take a different path, like you said, is when community is a proxy for asynchronous message boards or asynchronous connection. We are really focused on our North Star is live human to human connection and how we can use technology to enable that. I think the other layer of this is that community used to happen organically. It used to happen organically at work when you were walking down the hall. It used to happen when you were on the way to the grocery store. It used to happen. We had community centers and we had religious spaces, and all of that has really disintegrated. And so some of what we're trying to do is build in an inorganic way these spaces for belonging and connection that we know social health is such a core determinant of health overall. Our goal is really to make that more accessible to more people.
I would just add one thing, which is the experience that we noticed, no matter what the sort of shared struggles was between a group of people, was chain lifting. So if you are in community with other people who are similarly situated, whether that be through a particular challenge or identity or whatever it might be, and they are all trudging through a similar challenge as you, and you say, oh, you're like me and it's hard for you, and it's hard for you too, and it's hard for you too. And then they have this light bulb moment of, oh, I guess it's not me. It's not a me problem. It's just that what I am journeying through is hard. And that's the moment where we can unlock the behavior change. Because a lot of challenge that people have is they know what they need to do, but then it's like the actually doing it and they get stuck. And when they're with other people, they say, oh, this is just hard, right? This is what I'm going through is just hard. Now I can put in the time and the effort to build the skills or to change my behavior to meet the goals that I have. That's not possible with on-demand learning or content, or frankly, even one-on-one clinical support. It's only possible in the group setting.
I just even felt my own relief around challenges I'm experiencing myself thinking about that. That's just so great. And it's not only just anecdotal, but there's quite a bit of data supporting this, I understand, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think we know that group interventions are powerful in terms of substance abuse. We know that it's in areas of more kind of high acuity care. They're really hard to operationalize when you're talking about a lot of people. And that's really a big part of the challenge. But there is so much data about groups and behavior change and the way it creates that stickiness. And what we found was, again, we started with people that are caregivers and don't want to say it in their workplace, and the stigma and shame around that difficulty or that experience. But as Adrienne said, like any space that has an experience that has shame or stigma around it that people don't generally talk about in the open space, that they need a dedicated space to have support on. We're in conversation to do this for menopause, for divorce, for chronic illness. There are so many spaces that have these qualities. In those spaces, groups, I think, are particularly compelling.
Absolutely. And Claudia, how do you think about the world is changing so rapidly? There's a need for scalable human connection, provider shortages. As mental health and well-being and behavioral platforms evolve, where do you see group-based interventions fitting in and evolving?
Yeah, I'll say my journey to all of this, to like the left turn in my career, really started through an experience of postpartum depression. I remember I really navigated that period, and my mom is a psychiatrist. I come from a long line of mental health professionals. And I remember calling my sister, who's also a physician, and saying, my options are phone a friend or one-on-one clinical therapy. How is there no option in between? And similarly, how am I supposed to know when I cross the line between clinical and subclinical? And so in short, I really think that the future of this space has to involve more continuous spectrum of care, where there are many interventions and you can get step up or step down. And so we often say that when the group is done right, it acts as a third space between therapy and happy hour, between that phone a friend, unstructured social space and the highly structured one-on-one clinical therapy. And so if nothing else, I think that social health interventions and spaces will form part of the kind of continuity of care as we look at a full spectrum of mental health and well-being interventions. But even in a clinical space, we know how powerful group therapy can be or support groups can be. And so I think that in short is accessible in both, but I'm particularly excited about it as a subclinical intervention, because a lot of times when we onboard Keep Company members into our groups, what we find is they are just lonely. They just want to find people that are like them. And right now in the physical world, that feels really hard.
That's such an important point, I think, to hit on again is, of course, there's a space for one-on-one coaching and therapy. But if I'm understanding correctly, what's really making these groups so effective is being able to address that loneliness component. Is that fair to say?
That's it. That's it. We often refer folks out to clinical therapy if that is needed, and that should be part of the process, right? It should be part of helping people get the right level of care. And there are lots of ways to do that, particularly if groups were plugged into a provider that was already offering that, right? And so, yeah, I think that connecting those dots should be on the system and the infrastructure and not the individual.
I think this is probably the point where I confess my fangirl obsession with our former U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, who, on his way out of office, his parting prescription to our country was more connection. And I think the report is worth a lot of people spending a lot of time reading every single word of it, but it really does highlight that combating loneliness and building connection can be preventative, right? It can be the subclinical preventative care for people who don't have clinical conditions, but also there's a ton of data that shows that lonely folks are X times more likely to have clinical anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. And so the idea of building connection, no matter where you are on the mental health spectrum or on the journey of, do you already have a therapist? Great. Or did you already go through a program? You're recovering? Great. So I think that we can't emphasize more that it feels soft, but it's not. Like, the impact of loneliness is enormous, and it has a huge ripple effect on everywhere from teenagers to older adults. The data is everywhere. And what we are really proud and excited to do is partner with people to take, if they have a member base or a patient base, and we can say, hey, we can do groups for you. It's really hard. Let us help you. And just supercharge the impact, the value they're bringing to the people.
But even the topics that we've talked about here, just grief and loss and divorce, parenthood, I instantly can see the possibilities for having connections with peers. And Adrienne, maybe I'll ask you, groups at scale at the same time sounds a bit like an oxymoron. We're talking about intimacy and scale. These things rarely seem to go together. So Can you talk a little bit about how is Keep Company making it possible to deliver something that feels so deeply personal and relational, but also being able to be measurable and repeatable across thousands of people?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think our secret sauce really starts with our gathering technology, and we actually have multiple patents on how we gather the groups together. And it's a little bit of how similarly situated do people need to be to connect, but different enough to learn from and grow with each other. And that's a real question. And so, for example, we have found if people are too similar, then the space that they hold in the outcomes tend to stay really transactional. So if they're a little bit different, that's the room for growth. And we basically have codified that within our gathering technology. So that is the very first thing, because we've all been in a group of people, social or otherwise, where you either click or you don't. And you're like, what is that magic that makes this group sticky or makes me look forward to these meetings or makes me leave with that kind of buzzy energy or feeling? We get a lot of, I feel lighter. I just feel lighter. It's nice to know I'm not alone. I feel lighter. And it matters and who's in the group. And we look at 60 different factors. So that, like I said, that is the foundation and the engine of our tech platform, which then enables scale from there because it's completely closed loop. So when people register and share the data about themselves, we call it their whole person, not just one slice of who they are. You might be on a weight loss journey, but you're a person beyond that. Tell us who you are as a whole person. Then we get that right group together. That registration through gathering and introductions in our front end platform is all closed loop. And there's a lot of data that we gather from the individuals. And if the platform or our client has a facilitator, they can complete reports and that sort of thing. And that's what enables the insights, right? We can not only see things like, oh, engagement drops off after the second session, or X% of people don't complete the prescribed program or whatever it might be. We actually can, based on our development, say, here's the themes that are happening for people back here that they either might not be sharing with their support network or their clinical partners or whatever it might be. And that can really feed really powerful insights to our clients, the individuals themselves, right? So there's a lot of features and interventions that help deepen their connection and their learning. And so we say, and I'm sure we are not going to get off this call without talking about AI. It's going to happen. But what we say is our North Star with technology, we only build it if it's going to deepen that connection from those live synchronous meetings or further behavior change or deepen their learning. And so that's what we've built. So the scalability of it is everything from the very beginning of who and how we gather the group to how they use technology within their alliance together, and then to the outcomes that can really fuel more change.
That is incredible. And I think as soon as this episode is over, I'm going to go find my event planners group. That will be a busy chat, I'm sure. And how great to be intersectional as well. I can't wait to fill out the form that says I have tech in our name, but also I hate technology sometimes.
Yeah.
We
would make sure we call it, we would make sure you're not the lonely only. We say there's no lonely onlys in any group.
Yes, please bring an IT manager to my group. Yes, and of course, speaking technology, why not bring up this AI topic? There's just so much happening. We can't not talk about AI, mental health, behavioral health. How do you think about AI when it comes to this human-to-human connection? How are you guys leveraging it?
We're leveraging it a lot is the short answer. But I think that in the same way that we are leveraging technology as an enabler and to reduce the friction for them to get together, but not to change the fact that we need human to human synchronous connection. And so I think in short, what we're trying to make easy for the organization, for the administrator, for whoever is enabling connection between these people, that is what we're leveraging AI and technology to absolutely in every way that we can to make scheduling and logistics and communication and calendaring and the back end and the reporting and the insights. AI and automation is threaded into all of those places. Where we think the limit ends, where the line is in trying to replace human to human connection. So I think that there's a ton of exciting stuff in terms of behavioral health and mental health in a one-to-one interaction. But it will not replace human connection. It will not replace our need for it. And I think that there's a really dangerous line where if we interact socially and relationally with AI, there's something that is really scary, I think, about coming to expect a frictionless conversation, a frictionless interaction. And I think a lot of the tools that we've been given over the last couple of years that have exploded our access and convenience and all of these incredible things, they have also removed friction from a lot of spaces of human life. And I think that's actually really dangerous to expect from human to human relationships and connection. There's a lot of data that's been coming out around friction as a core part of resilience building. But I think particularly when it comes to relationships, there is a discomfort and awkwardness and friction that has to be there. And so you can remove friction from the how and the process, but we do not want to remove it from the human, because ultimately that is how depth is born. That is how that texture of what makes us feel alive is a core part of where the resilience comes from. And so I think we are really excited about the uses of AI and all these different layers of enablement, but we're lonely, and AI is not going to solve that specific problem.
Yeah. Actually, it was the last year's BHT conference where I heard the chief medical officer of Talkspace talking about how they use AI. And I'm sure the conversation that we have in a few weeks is going to be completely different than it was even just last year. But one thing she shared was one use case was for quality control of their therapists, including measuring patient engagement. And I walked away fascinated because what she shared was based on their AI analysis, the point at which patients were the most engaged was when the therapist was just listening and holding space, not when they were reframing, not when they were providing content or listicles or giving advice. It was purely when they were just there listening. And that's what happens in groups, especially when you have the right kind of alchemy together to create the safe and brave space. It's not going to be smooth. It might be have the friction in the beginning, but once you get there, it's pretty magical. And we don't want AI to replace that, like Claudia said.
I just love that you both emphasize that, because even at Behavioral Health Tech, I of course, have been a strong advocate for technology in behavioral health, but people heal in relationships, and just such important points to get that experience. How can we develop our skills dealing with the people in our lives if it's not with other people? So
if we can't stand in line for coffee and talk to a stranger, how are we going to have the hard conversations with the people we're close to that have really hurt us? And so the skills atrophy. The more there's a replacement, we don't actually have the skills to connect. And so we are, again, the group is the forcing function to continue to practice those and then take them and apply them outside of the group.
Such great points. I'm still ordering ahead on Starbucks, though.
I know, me too. And the convenience.
I can't quit. I can't quit the Starbucks app. I will not.
Just the stars, the rewards. That's another episode.
So good.
Oh, well, I'm just thinking through all of the many use cases of people and so many journeys of their stages of their lives that could benefit from being in a KEEP group. I'd love to hear from you, just looking ahead. Where do you see the biggest opportunity for, I'll say, connection-based solutions in behavioral health? And are there any populations or use cases where you think the impact could be especially transformative?
We might have two different answers on this. I can go first in that I think I come from a family where there's more than a handful of people who have been through AA, right? So there are certain kind of behavioral health conditions that we long know the traditional group in person works. I put it in substance use disorders, weight loss is another one, where I honestly get excited, and Salome, this is right in your wheelhouse, is youth. Because if we can support them as early as possible to build the skills, the social emotional skills, the confidence, and give them like the resources, then not to say we will avoid or mitigate any mental health challenges they might have, but it might not be as hard. Maybe they'll seek support earlier because they know that they're not alone. And so I get pretty excited about potential partnerships with platforms who are focused on supporting mental health of our kids.
Yeah, I think a lot about seasons of care, seasons of life, seasons of work. And I think that the reason why we need a spectrum of care is because we need to be able to, this expectation that like there's a switch that gets flipped. You are depressed, you are not depressed. You need help, you don't need help. You're lonely, you're not lonely. That binary is not what how the human brain or the human body operate. We live on a spectrum. And so I think that we need tools for that spectrum. And so when people lean more and they need a little bit more, we need tools. And I think in those moments, in those inflection points, groups can be really powerful. I continue to be really passionate about moms and dads and caregivers. I think the return, that investment is so big. The ripple effects of investing in a new mother over the course of her work and her life and her family's life is just enormous. I think caregivers is something that we've done a ton of work in and feel really strongly about. It's like the invisible elephant in every single room. By 2030, we'll have more people over the age. I mean, like the demographic shifts are so enormous when it comes to caregiving and how that will fall on these next generations. Similarly, I talked about menopause earlier. I think these are spaces that have long been, you like whisper it in the corner of a room to somebody, maybe, right? If you feel brave. And so I think similar to the postpartum period and to caregiving, menopause has such stigma that I think that getting people together in those periods is really important. But like Adrienne said, if we can get upstream, there's nothing that is more exciting, right? So like, I think particularly for young people, teenagers, early adults, young adults who have had less spaces to practice relational skills and to practice the friction, have had less forcing functions for the friction of human to human connection. I think that's really exciting. And so similarly, really excited about that space as well. So I think I just said everyone is actually what just happened. So I'll go with everyone.
Well, good. There's just so much need right now and in so many communities. And so I really encourage our audience to learn more. And in fact, if we could just wrap up, where can folks learn more?
keep-company.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Adrienne, Claudia. Such a pleasure hearing these amazing examples and just the impact that you're having on employers, individuals, and excited to see you at the Behavioral Health Tech Conference.
I'll see you next month.
Thanks for tuning in to Expanding Access. We hope you're feeling inspired by today's discussion. If you've enjoyed the episode, subscribe and share it with your network. For more content and opportunities to get involved in transforming care, visit behavioralhealthtech.com. Until next time, let's keep pushing boundaries and expanding access together.